air and space forces. We'll examine the key role of our supply chains and the challenges of balancing international collaboration and national sovereignty. Let's tackle these issues together.
This is the last panel for today, which will focus on a crucial topic for the success of the Air Forces: the role of the aerospace and defense industry and the access to key technologies. As we know, increasing costs and complexity demand for international cooperation, but this poses challenges to national sovereignty and autonomy. Our panelists will explore the likely future of air and space forces in relation to emerging and disruptive technologies and the risks they pose. They will also address the delicate balance between military requirements and strategic research and development. For this difficult task, we have invited the leadership of the most important industries from Europe and NATO to join us. Our moderator for this panel is a senior researcher at the NATO Defense College. He has an impressive background, having previously served as a visiting and postdoctoral fellow at Johns Hopkins, Columbia, Stanford, and Harvard universities. He has also worked at the European Union Institute for Security Studies and at the Royal United Services Institute. He has consulted for Leonardo, the Office of Net Assessment at the US Department of Defense, the Italian government, the Italian Air Force, and the European Union Military Committee. His research has been published in leading academic journals and featured in outlets such as The Economist, The Washington Post, The New Yorker, and Wired. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Andrea Gilli to the stage.
Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for being here, Excellencies, authorities, generals, ladies and gentlemen. The light is on me, but as in the space, the light comes from some shining bright stars, who are actually our speakers, who I would like to invite on the stage, starting from Domitilla Benigni from Aeronautica, Ted Colbert from Boeing, Lorenzo Mariani from MBDA, who actually just, we were informed that he's going to join Leonardo as general co-manager in a few weeks, Riccardo Procacci from Aeroavio, and last but not least, Michael Williamson from Lockheed Martin. Thank you very much for being here. This is the last panel of the day, but it's not the last day, because tomorrow we are going to continue. And I mentioned the stars, and obviously my mind went to the All-Star game. And the reason is that if we are here today to talk about the Air Force and 100 years of air power, and especially the Italian Air Force, it's because over 100 years ago, some individuals, some hobbyists, innovators, entrepreneurs, mechanics, engineers, decided to do a lot of things and to change the world. The greatest air power theorist of the 20th century is probably Michael Air Jordan, because he was able to fly without an engine. And when Michael Jordan gave his farewell speech to the NBA Hall of Fame, he said something interesting. He said, because limits, like fears, are often just an illusion. And if we're here today, it's because over 100 years ago, some individuals, those hobbyist entrepreneurs, wanted to go beyond our fears, beyond our limits, in order to produce airplanes. And the innovators, inventors, engineers of yesterday are what we call today the defense industrial base. And that's basically here extremely well represented in this panel. Before going to do the panel itself, I would like to ask perfectly the backstage to go for our poll. You can vote with your QR code. What's the main challenge for the European defense industry in the next 20 years? Insufficient long-lasting investments to sustain research and development, fragmented sovereignty among European nations, lack of talented workforce, or external dependencies in the supply chain. So please vote, and we'll discuss later the results. Going back to the innovation, the technological change, what has happened over the past 100 years, all this technological change has opened a lot of new doors, a lot of new domains, a lot of new environments. That's why we talk about new and emerging challenges. And here I would like to talk with Domitilla Benigni, because obviously we have seen a lot of change over the past several decades, and there is the digital dimension, the electronic magnetic spectral dimension. And so maybe if you can help us navigate through what the industry is facing in these domains right now, looking also towards the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. And of course, I'm very honored to be here, to be invited in this great opportunity in this Air Power Conference. And this conference is taking place in the birthday of our Air Force in the century. So it's a great pleasure for me. So talking about the electromagnetic spectrum, that is the core business of Electronica since 72 years, the electromagnetic spectrum are in the center of a strong revolution generated by the digitalization phenomena. This will affect both the electromagnetic spectrum in the civil but also in the military field. So if we focus in the military field, of course, we all know the so-called Internet of Battlefield Things concept that links platform, sensors, unmanned systems, all in this net-centric information situational awareness. And this it's the delivery of the competitive operational advantage for all the users. So in this very, let me say, dense environment, a dense global network, the ability to sense, to manage, and shape the electromagnetic spectrum environments becomes crucial. And so this is true both for competitors or adversaries, but also to all the forces. So we have to counter this dense environment, and also we have to maintain the relevance. We need to prevail in this integrated and coordinated approach in the full range of the electromagnetic spectrum. All the activities that are linked to the electromagnetic spectrum, like EW, SIGINT, electromagnetic battle management, also cyber warfare, all these domains are important and crucial. So in one word, we used to call the CEMA, so cyber electromagnetic activities. But as we said, and I listened this morning, many people talk about the contested and congested environment. The cyber and the electromagnetic spectrum, we have to manage it because we have the ability and to control and to make the sense of the operational picture in the right course of action required. We don't want and we don't need to forget the human connection. So we have to gain the spectrum dominance, and we need what we call the game changers. So we have to embrace the new technologies. We have to use artificial intelligence, machine learning, and these technologies will help us to deliver the advantage of a cognitive, cooperative, predicted electromagnetic spectrum capable of outperforming the adversary. So what the industry could do in this environment, we have to anticipate these potential threats and this new scenario. So we have to work in collaboration with the armed forces to define the new operational requirements. And also we have to drive the industry efforts in this new chapter, because everything is moving very fast, and we are moving together with our Air Force. So in this panorama, the Western national EW industry contribution could be relevant, and we have to take a solid partnership around Europe, but also in the Western country. So collaboration should start from the beginning. So we have to face and to collaborate, to join the force with our MOD to get the R&D participation. We have to share the operational data, the analysis of the expertise and the operational. And another important factor is that the MOD, we have to introduce in our development phase some new technologies like the digital twin. This technology could shorten the development phase. And the last point, important, very important for the industry, would be the collaboration with our MOD to set up a strategic long-term strategy for the export, and also for transfer of technology. This is what we see in this very, let me say, difficult environment now.
Well, thank you very much. That was very interesting. Also, thank you for being exactly right on time. We see here that's very important. So, I mean, we started with the airspace, electromagnetic spectrum. You mentioned cyber, and in a way, this leads us to one of the big debates, especially at the military level, but also the industrial level, which is about the cross-domain, multi-domain, all-domain. And we all know in a peer-compare competition, we need to be able to address the capabilities of an adversary intended to deny certain domains, but obviously this has some industrial and technological implications. So I would like to give the floor to Michael Williamson because you have been thinking and working on these issues, and so maybe you can help us understand them a bit more in depth.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'd also like to add my congratulations on the 100th year anniversary. It's quite the milestone. I've always asked my team for two things. One, I don't want to be first before people have their coffee, and I don't want to be last before people can have a cocktail. And so, in the interest of time, I'm really going to only talk about two main concepts. And I think, you know, through the course of the day, there's been this really crucial discussion that talks about innovation. But I would offer we've talked about more than that. We've talked about capability versus capacity. We've talked about quantity versus quality. I would ask us to kind of expand ourselves in our thinking. And I'm going to share with you one from my role at Lockheed Martin as the chief strategist, if you will, but also in how we're addressing how we interact with our customers at the national level, but also directly with warfighters. So I think there's two things that we have to realize, and that is, so when you think about multi-domain operations, why this is such an important notion for us as we go forward. Look, I'm from Lockheed Martin. We build some amazing individual systems, whether you're talking about the F-35, the Black Hawk helicopter, the missile systems that we build, and throughout the portfolio. Individually, the strength of those systems are quite powerful. But the reality is that what we have to move to, and what we are now focused on, is how do you provide integrated mission solutions to the warfighter so that they are not trying to figure out how to do that integration after it's been delivered. Because as you heard the last panel talk about, time is not our friend. And so how do we now think integrated from the start, but not only integrated, but thinking about that from an MDO perspective, where we're now looking at how do you now leverage an airborne platform linked directly to a ground platform providing long-range fires. And so you've heard discussion about the ability to network and the reliance on the networking, cyber, all of those capabilities. But it starts earlier than that. It starts with us having real discussions about how do you define interoperability and how do you define open systems, not only on your platform, but when you're starting to go across domains and when you're starting to look at other national systems. That's when you start to create effects that are greater than the individual performance of the weapon system you have. So when you talk about cyber, space, air, land, all of those things coming together in an interoperable manner, I don't think that's a concept that we can't grasp. And how do we bring innovation to that? The next part of the discussion, though, the next part of the concept, though, is what we at Lockheed are terming 21st century security. And that's not just about what you acquire, but how you acquire it, and when you acquire it, and thinking all the way down to the supply chain, and whether you're going to have to do everything internal, or whether you have the ability to think ahead and look where are there opportunities to leverage the engineering talent, the production talent, the supply-based talent across the coalition so that you don't have single points of failure. If we've learned anything over these last 18 months, is that there's a lot of fragility that exists in our supply chain. And think about this. We're all driven by our ability to man the equipment, to produce, and to finance. And so if every nation is trying to build the best that they can in the quantities, so capability and capacity, do we really have the wherewithal to accomplish that? But if you take a more global aspect that says we have strengths and we have capabilities within our own borders, but we also have capability and capacity that we can leverage outside of our borders, then we come forward with a more holistic and more resilient capability. And that mindset is not something that you do after the fight has started. It is something that has to be a part of your planning today. And that starts not only with the design of the capability, but the sustainment of that capability, and then what is your supplier base that allows you to continue to support the warfighter. So I want to make sure that I provide the rest of the panel time, so I'm going to stop.
No, well, thank you very much. So thank you for these. I started basically saying that you need a defense industrial base to have an air force, but then if we move a bit around the concept, and the Italians in the room understand there's a song for children which runs, to have a table, you need the wood, to have the wood, you need the tree, to have the tree, and so forth. So if you have an airplane, well, you need a set of things. We have airplanes without pilots, we have airplanes without munitions, but there are not many airplanes without propulsion systems. And so that's not much way around. And I would move then to Riccardo Procacci to understand the past, maybe present, and hopefully also future, or maybe also in the next session, of propulsion systems. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Andrea. First of all, let me join everyone else here in congratulating the Air Force for its 100th anniversary. As a small and former lieutenant in the Air Force, I formed a personal bond with the Italian Air Force that stays with me till today. And being able to sit here and speaking in front of this audience is an overwhelming experience for me. So hopefully you'll pardon my emotion when I talk. Now. Back to your question. Yeah, there are not many aircrafts without an engine, definitely. But typically, the engine is not the most visible part of an aircraft. Yeah, when the pilot goes afterburner, yeah, we tend to do a little bit of a noise. We make these beautiful shock waves, but other than that, our role is to stay in the aircraft bay and be there for the pilot. When the pilot needs us, deliver the power that he needs and in a reliable way. And that's really what we do. And we've been doing this for 115 years. Actually, my company, Aero, was born a few years before the Italian Air Force. We built our first piston engine only 5 years after the first flight of the Wright brothers. And since then, we built for Italian Air Force propulsion and Avio Aero. They've been synonymous. So we've been providing engines all the way throughout World War II. Then the unfortunate events of the war. After the war, we could not have access to certain technology that were needed to help the transformation of the propulsion from pistons to jet engines. So after that, we started to produce engines under license from our partners, mostly Rolls-Royce and General Electric. And this kept going on till the 90s, when we started working mostly on the EJ200. The EJ200 was the engine for the Eurofighter, was a transformational moment for us because we came back to design and components and entire sections of an engine. And that transformation kept going till today, because from what we started there, designing subsystems, component subsystems, now we are to the point where we can design and produce a full engine, like our turboprop catalyst engine that is going to be integrated into the Eurodrone system. When we go back, to the role of an engine into the aircraft, obviously I'm a little bit joking about the fact that we are not very visible, but honestly, as I was today in my stand in the show, or many other comments that I received in the past, when I get a pilot coming to me and say, I always felt safe flying on your engine, always had your engine doing what the engine was supposed to do. That's really what we are, what our role is. Our role is not, in a way, not to be seen. And this is what we've been working on for 115 years. And then you were asking, okay, what about the future? No, the past and the present are only our ticket to ride for the future. And the name of our future is called definitely GCAP. We are part of the development of the new of these new systems of systems, it is called. And in my view, it is a crucial moment for our future, the future of the propulsion industry in Europe. And there are several reasons why this program is so important in defining our future. The first one is that in Europe, we didn't develop propulsion technology for the fifth generation fighter. So getting into the development of the sixth generation, of the propulsion system for the sixth generation engine is of the essence if you don't want to lose forever in Europe the ability to produce a state-of-art propulsion systems. So it is, in my view, an element of our own existence as a propulsion industry in Europe. The second element is the fact that the technology that we develop on these military applications are of the essence to propel the overall propulsion or the overall propulsion industry. If I go back to what happened with the EJ200, the engine of the Eurofighter, Avio Aero would not be here today in the form and shape that it is, if we didn't develop technologies on that engine that then we have been able to mature and apply to commercial engines, and now the technology that we've been maturing and growing on commercial engines represents the base from where we start developing the next generation technology for the sixth fighter engine. This, in Italian we call it this flying wheel effect of technology that moves seamlessly from military to commercial and commercial to military. It's of the essence for our future. And as such, I heartedly disagree with the idea that dual use is the best solution for development of technology. I think we need the technology that is meant for what is needed at that point and that will translate or will transfer seamlessly to commercial application that will come back. Trying to do something that works so for both is something that as an industrialist I would not recommend. The third element is that we need to realize that the sixth generation propulsion technology that we are seeking is so complex, and we can touch on it more, what that means, so complex that we cannot do it in isolation. There is no way. The role of collaboration is key, and it's an enabling function for us to be successful. The last element for me, that is an element of attention, looking at the future of our propulsion technology, is creating a supporting supply chain that sustain our innovation. We can have the best engine in the world, but if we are not careful in making sure that we have a supply chain that is close enough to our technology, we may be running big problems in the future.
Thank you. So in my agenda, I had here that I was supposed to call the poll again, and basically you gave a perfect introduction to call the poll. So if you can put the slide with the survey on the back so people can vote again. In the meantime, it's interesting because your discussion was ultimately about a set of past programs inherently which were multinational. So here in this panel, we don't have big and small companies. We have great companies. We don't have national and multinational companies. We're all transnational companies because in different ways, there's a dimension of globalization in all of you. And this can bring us, because the panel looks at Europe, the United States, the transatlantic relations, which are at the end the core of some of the debates, because industrial policy is coming back in different forms and shapes, both in Europe and the US. And in Europe, maybe for the first time, and we had a sense in the previous panel, also with the EU, what is going on. And so I'd like to hear Ted Colbert, whose company has been a great actor on many multinational programs, your perspective exactly on the transatlantic security architecture. Next year, NATO will be the 75th anniversary, apologies. And so what is your view on the transatlantic cooperation in general? Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you for the question. Can you all hear me? Yes, oh, there we go. All right, thank you for the question. And once again, it is an honor to be here for the 100th anniversary of the Italian Air Force. Our team is proud to be on the ground, spending time with all of you and industry, and making sure that we keep all these important conversations going forward. Look, I think that the last couple years have demonstrated to us the importance of transatlantic cooperation in every front. And it's important to recognize that our friends and partners and brothers in the Ukraine have been fighting a strong war, and they've been doing really well. And there are a ton of lessons to be learned from that experience. Things that have gone well, things that we can do better about, and I think that's what we're doing right now. So, we talk about this word innovation a lot, and I'll bring it back to the forefront because I think it is important. It's a way that we describe how we make progress together. Forums like this allow us to come and dig into where those opportunities are to move us forward. And, I think we talked a lot about what we need to field to support the future threat. The last panel talked about the pace increasing of the threats from our adversaries, and we have to be very, very understanding of that. That requires us to work together, both in the West and NATO and Europe, in ways that we've never worked together before. We've got to break down barriers in our procurement systems, both in countries, across countries and regions, and around the world. That helps us improve the pace of moving technologies and breaking down issues like tech transfer and others at a pace that allows us to actually innovate even faster. And then we've got to do it together, and we've got to do it very quickly. If you think about all the capabilities that we're fielding from seabed to space, we have great point solutions, we have great platforms, but we also have all this emerging capability in the digital world, whether it's artificial intelligence or advanced materials or additive manufacturing. And we also know who does what well across the world. And so in order for us to speed up, we just need to acknowledge who does what well, figure out how to break down all those barriers of how we work together, and begin quickly getting repetitions on building the next innovations. I've been lucky enough to run our services business, so I understand our life cycle from building things to servicing them. And I've also had the gift of trying to transform enterprises over the course of my career. And the only way that you do that very quickly is by getting iterations and driving transformation very quickly by working together. And I think our biggest opportunity is to do exactly that. Through NATO, through our alliances, understanding the threats that we have in front of us, and leveraging innovative techniques to break down our procurement systems, our ability to transfer technology, our ability to work in an agile way, bringing the warfighter into the solution sets that we have, and then giving them the opportunity to test and learn and scale at a pace that we've never done before. So I think we're in a good place. I think we've learned a lot, and I think we have a lot of opportunity in front of us.
Thank you very much. And when you talk especially about transatlantic security, we cannot ignore the war in Ukraine. And the war in Ukraine, the previous panel has raised and discussed some of the hot topics. And some of them are definitely about munitioning, the lack of stocks, air defense systems, and eventually the threat. Thankfully, the other day, the Patriot systems took down an hypersonic Russian missile. But there's an important part of that dimension, and then leads to the obvious discussion with Lorenzo Mariani, who is managing director of MBDA Italy, but also we all discovered you're moving to Leonardo in a few weeks. So I'll give you the floor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Andrea, and I'm happy and proud to be here today. So thanks to the organizers, to General Goretti for inviting me. Yes, I was recommended by the CEO of Leonardo not to talk only about MBDA. But unfortunately, I will start with MBDA for the exact reason that you were mentioning in your introduction, because we are talking about collaboration. And I think MBDA allows me not to talk about only about ideas and plans, but about lessons learned. Riccardo said that Avio was born more than 120 years ago. Unfortunately, MBDA was born only 21 years ago. But it was a genial idea of Italy, France, and UK to put together all their assets and when I say all, I mean all, their assets in missile and missile systems. Those assets were struggling to be profitable and to be successful. And first of all, it was very clear that they were not, as a single company, as different companies, able to face competition. So MBDA was created, and I think the experience of today is that after 20 years, figures have doubled, and more than this, we were able to provide to our customers products and systems that otherwise we would not be able to provide. We can put on the table several examples. For example, you said air defense. Air defense is very trendy in this period, and I think Aster systems that are now in service with Italy, France, and UK, but also several other customers in the export, are one typical example of a system, of a program that requires billions of investments, but then gives the possibility to have access to a single level of procurement with controlled cost, common logistic basis, and by the way, also to promote on the market, and this for an industry is a key element, in the export market, a good solution supported by governments. By the way, I think this much more than recovered all the investment for something that otherwise would not be possible. The same situation for the Meteor, exactly. And of course, to come back to what Roberto Cingolani was recommending me, I think also the Eurofighter is a similar example. And I would add one point. Today, this is for European countries even more urgent than it was 20 years ago, because the evolution of the threats, and I think air defense is a good example, makes systems more complex. And system more complex means more expensive. More expensive means a single nation will never be capable to do it, or will not be capable to do it in the right time. And I really agree with what was said by Mr. Bronk previously, that we should really prepare today and in the next 3 or 4 years for what we think will be the threat in 3 or 4 years from now. I will add one point quickly, that is about sovereignty, because I think sovereignty is a key word in our environment. Sovereignty is a need for nations, and so we cannot give up, but it should not be the reason why we do not do collaborative programs. On that, I think there is a lot about politics, a lot about human factors, trust, but there is also a lot about how the industry interprets that. Because I think that industry, especially large corporations like Leonardo, Lockheed, Northrop Grumman, can provide solution to that, compatible with politics, or can create obstacles. And I think, of course, I'm in favor of the first one. And we try every day to provide solutions to enhance the collaboration. And I will also touch a single point that I think was clear also in the recent Ukrainian conflict, that even in sectors where transatlantic collaboration is not so developed, like for missiles, I think it is possible to do more, as we were doing with the MIADs in the past, provided that we face with the right approach. And the right approach takes into account the development of both parties, interoperability, capability to use, and the growth of the whole environment.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was an interesting the first part with the questions. One aspect which we've not touched upon much, but is really one of the hot topics, is about space. Because ultimately, If we look 20 years ago, space was mostly uncontested, and now we know is becoming increasingly contested, and many of the companies here on the panel works on space issues. The threats are many, but they are difficult to address. And maybe I would then come back again to Domitilla Benigni, because there is an important electromagnetic component to the threats to space, and maybe you can discuss this together. Thank you.
Yes, in fact, we saw that in 2019, the space moved from the so-called space new economy to a NATO warfare domain. Like the other traditional warfighter domain. So now the Western society, but also the military forces, strong depends on the space. So now the space is becoming really important, also considering the new function that we will put in the new constellation of mini satellites. And so these connected satellites, and they provide the global coverage for military ISR, ECBM defense support, but also the position navigation, timing, and the strategic and tactical awareness. So the space will be crucial in serving this infrastructure of the sixth generation system like GCAP. So the space, it really become the, let me say, the new military domain. So from this point of view, of course, space is an electronical cyber warfare. So we need to secure and to protect all the functions that we will put in the space domain, like, of course, the traditional land, air, and sea domain. So we have to direct all our resources to increase the secure and the defense of the space, because all this space system could be vulnerable, not only from enemy kinetic, but also cyber and electronic attacks. So this is what Aeronautica is thinking. This is a new, let me say, line of business and line on research. Of course, the system in the space must be resilient, so capable of surviving and operating always. And so we have to focus on these cyber, space, electromagnetic domains. And of course, also to do this, we have to collaborate with our RDOD, but also, as Lorenzo and the other panelists said, with the other companies, because space is really a congested environment. Many industries in Italy, but also in Europe or others are working in the space, and so Aeronautica is really to collaborate with the help also with our Air Force.
Thank you very much. I mean, I should have mentioned myself, so thanks for stealing my role of moderator. That obviously one of the aspects that have emerged clearly in the war in Ukraine was the role of space, and I don't have to go too much in depth in this respect. But obviously the war in Ukraine, when we look at the transatlantic security, has changed a lot of things. One is the air power. Justin Bronx was mentioning before, and he has written a lot of interesting things on the topic. And obviously air power in a matter of 1 year or so has changed, and we look towards 2030 will keep changing for a lot of reasons. Legacy platforms, some of them will be retired, new ones will enter into service, and as we have been discussing, there's current developments to equip our air forces with new platforms. And so maybe I would like to go back again to Michael Williamson on these issues, because the future of air power, connecting all those capabilities, some of them are legacy, some are being deployed, some are future. If you could help us in this respect.
No, thank you. Thank you. So you know, what I tried to do earlier is talk about the practicality and the reality of the environment that we're going to operate in, shaped by budgets and other constraints. I think we have a real model out there that I think demonstrates how we can address in the future things like supplier base and capability. As this is an air power conference, let's use the F-35 as an example. So very quickly in Europe, there will be over 500 F-35s in place, and that's an extreme capability that will be in the hands of various nations. But again, you have to take a step back and look at it in a broader sense that starts with, so we are manufacturing, we are sustaining, we are supplying that capability from multiple points around the world. So assembly happens here in Europe. Training, coordination, the ability to make sure that that aircraft isn't tied to one location, I think is a perfect example of where real interoperability starts. But let's go even further. So if you think about the conversation that I offered earlier, and that is, so we can now connect to, within multiple domains, to a ship, to an air defense system, to a ground platform. You also have the ability to connect 5th gen to 5th gen, so those 500 aircraft that I've talked about, but also the connectivity to the 4th generation aircraft. And so now start to have this conversation that makes, so think of that F-35 and the capability that it brings to the battle space, the same way that in America you would think about a quarterback on a football field or on a soccer field, the ability to make everyone else better. That's the change that you have in this environment. This is how you start to now have a discussion about integrated mission capabilities, where you now can share sensor data from one platform all the way to another platform, regardless of whether it is a 5th generation capability, if you will. And so now you're talking about how do we leverage these advanced capabilities and interoperability and the ability to move information around to make everything else better.
Well, thank you. I mean, this is clearly connected to your previous pitch about multi-domain and standardization and common interfaces in order to navigate through this complex environment. I would like from these, because still we will need to power future fleets, and so there's no way around. And so maybe go and looking towards the future of propulsion systems. What are the challenges lurking behind what has to be done, and what actually maybe some known unknowns, because at the end, I mean, I should have mentioned before, the start of air power, the start of airplanes starts with propulsion systems. So please.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me start with a short disclaimer that the requisite of the GCAP propulsion system is not there yet. So whatever I say is just the results of my vivid imagination. Okay. Having said that, I think that the future of the propulsion system on an aircraft, on a 6th generation aircraft in particular, will not be to be a propulsion system. It will be a propulsion system and a power generation system. I believe that the next generation aircrafts will require electrical power much more at a level that's much higher than what it is today, and the engine, the gas turbine, will have to provide at the same time propulsion and the ability to produce high quantity of electric power, which poses a lot of technological challenges in how you manage just to say one, the load transition and the control of the whole system, not to mention the overall heat rejection. The second big topic that I think will be developed in the years to come is what kind of engines will be needed for for the adjunct, for the loyal wingman, whether these aircrafts will be meant to come back to base with a pilot and be used multiple times, whether it will be treatable, so have a different, with an engine that probably will need to be operated only for a few hours. All of that will be really be discussed and devised and we will come up with some specific requisition in the years to come. But for us, engine manufacturers will be, the years to come are probably the most exciting that we've seen in the last 10, 15 years.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. It's interesting, this conversation, because it touches upon several different issues. Some are concepts, doctrines driving procurement and design and development, and obviously research and development. And they're all, in a way, combined. It was interesting, the previous panel, the discussion about supercomputers, how much they could help in designing next generations, but also the cyber digital aspect is also an enabler, in a way, generates some threats. And so maybe I would go back to Ted Colbert on the cyber and digital aspects, digitalization more in general, to what extent there are opportunities also in manufacturing, in services you mentioned before, but also how exactly to navigate this complex world.
Yeah, I think it's a huge opportunity for us, and again, it is one of the keys to allowing us to move even faster to field next generation autonomous capabilities. As was mentioned, loyal wingman as an example as we move forward. I've experienced, and we have experienced today, right now, where we are learning from using model-based engineering as a basis for developing the next generation platforms. Our autonomous refueling tanker has a digital basis. Just right from design, we are taking the product definition of that platform and pulling it all the way through with a plan for it to be used in the services world. So we talk about ChatGPT and generative AI. We've been working on generative design for a little bit longer than you've heard about ChatGPT. That helps our engineers reuse design practices, reuse capabilities that have already been proven, and speeds up the development process. So design, engineering have all kinds of opportunities with regard to digital. When we get into manufacturing, it allows us to use that same data to feed the manufacturing system, connect the supply chain, drive change much faster, get to improve first-time quality as we develop next-generation systems. Again, it still takes a lot of iteration. One of the myths about digital is that digital models are always perfect. They aren't always perfect, and so you've got to actually build something and learn from that, and then iterate again on the algorithms and the underlying technology. And then as you move your way into putting things in the theater, in the services world, use the same data to drive performance. Operational effectiveness every single day allows you to predict maintenance challenges. It allows you to be more sustainable by optimizing things like fuel consumption on platforms. And then back to the bigger discussion that we had, it allows us to connect the multi-domain capabilities that we are all fielding today from seabed to space. If we field the right set of standards, we have real open standards and interoperable capabilities. The future is about fighting wars in a platform-agnostic way. It doesn't matter what the brand is on the product. It's about making sure that the warfighter gets the data they need, when they need it, and how they need to make great decisions and get things done. So I believe the future is about leveraging this capability from design through engineering, back and forth into the supply chain, into theater, and sustaining all of our products every day. And there are great examples of this that we're learning about now. The importance will be our ability to scale as we move forward, especially scaling autonomous capability. Those have to be proven, they have to be scaled, and we have to have them ready for the fight.
Thank you. So if we can have again the slide with the questions, the survey, so that we can look at it once again. In the meantime, okay, thank you. I would give the floor to Lorenzo Mariani, because I would start looking at this survey and commenting. So what's the main challenge for European defense industry in the next 20 years? Fragmented sovereignty among European nations seems the majority. External dependencies on the supply chain, second. Insufficient long-lasting investment to sustain research and development. Lack of talent at the workforce. So, I mean, I'm part of the authors of those questions, and it's interesting because I would have actually picked the very last. Because if I have to think, as you were talking, I was thinking, we are talking, all of you, in different ways about digital twins, talent, so code, the software, and so forth. But the software world, it's very different and very difficult, because when you need coders, you are going to compete more than anybody else with the Google and Apples and so forth, which is a matter of there are different challenges to attract, and it takes a lot of time to train extremely talented software engineers, and then they have also to acquire the experience, and we all know these things. So I would have picked this one, but apparently either I'm right and everybody else in the room is wrong, or very few, or probably I don't get the consensus. But maybe we can start with you commenting these questions, and if you want to add, obviously, anything else.
No, I think the question is a very good one, and the answer is basically close to what I have in mind, and I can give some examples on that. Starting from current environment, Ukraine experience, we knew that hypersonic was a threat. We knew. Now we have the confirmation. Of course, we were not able, neither at the single nation level nor at European level, to start in time a program that is running today, HIDIS, Twister, to provide a solution to this problem. Now, the program that is in place is going to provide a solution to the next level of threat, hypersonic threat in 2030. But I think this comes back to your question. For sure, fragmented sovereignty, but I would say more in general, fragmentation. It's very difficult for me to think that key programs such as the defense ones can be conducted without a strong lead from 2-3 nations. Then I understand that the approach of the European Defence Fund is slightly different, okay, but this is a limitation. I think the external dependencies on the supply chain is more a problem perceived by each nation, but not necessarily by Europe, and in any case can be addressed, while the long-lasting investment that is lacking is clearly related also to the first point, the fragmentation. So, and this just a final point, leads me also to say something on the economy of war, because then it's correlated. We hear a lot about economy of war. I think we are not in an economy of war, not even near. If it is economy of war, in 1 week somebody decides what to buy. In 1 month buys, and in 6 months somebody delivers. We are not even near. We just got the wake-up call, and again, we have to prepare for the 3-4 years. That's
okay, thank you. So what I would do, we have a very intimidating clock here in front of us telling us that we have slightly more than 10 minutes. So if maybe each of you 2 minutes commenting probably these results or what you think is the real issue, either for your industry or for the industry as a whole, and then so we call in time and I won't get fired, although I actually don't work for the Air Force. So Domitilla, Benigni, please.
Yes, it's work? Okay. Yes, I'm very surprised about the last response, the lack of talented workforce. I see, from my point of view, that is a real problem in Italy, but also in Europe. And I want to underline not only workforce, not only talented, that it means graduate or undergraduate person, but also technicians that in our sector are maybe the pillar that are involved daily on board of ships with the Air Force, with our technical environment. And of course, it's my role, I have to underline the lack of women in this sector. So of course, defense needs also the talented women.
Well, thank you. So, Michael Williamson, on this survey, what's your main take?
No, I'd have to agree with my distinguished panel member. I think the results are a reflection of the concern about commitment and consistency to a capability that's needed. If you think about the fight that's going on today in the Ukraine, and most of us think about it and try to learn from it every day, I would make the argument that the capabilities that are being used predominantly are capabilities that were developed, in some cases, 20 years ago. And so I think what I see in this response is, are we going to have the commitment to the development, fielding, training, and use of the equipment? And in that environment, do you build in those capabilities that allow you the margin, if you will, to grow and to be able to react to changes in the threat? So I'm not surprised by this reaction, but it really does require us to think our way through what are the things that we're going to invest in and stay with so that you have the capability, because you go to war with the systems you have, not the ones you wish you had.
Thank you. Thank you. Your previous comments were a lot about these things, but if you could still tell us a few words, Riccardo Procacci, on what you think is the main issue.
Yeah, no, I already commented about from the industrial standpoint, about the absolute need for transnational, transatlantic, transnational collaboration. Technologies, challenges ahead of us are impossible to win on our own if you are fragmented. But I want to insist on the second point about supply chain. I remember when war started, and after 2 or 3 weeks, we found ourselves in the situation of, do we have to stop production because we can't get hold of titanium in the quantity we needed? It was a shock. Now, lucky was that we had put that on stock, but for other reasons, because we wanted just to hedge the economical risk of it. But if you hadn't do that, we would have put our production, certain production of ours to a stop. So when I talk about supply chain, I think we need to make sure we look at supply chain all the way through, starting from metals to the ability to transform to the logistic chain that brings this thing to us. If we don't do that as we design the new weapon systems, we will be in trouble.
Thank you. So we have a few more minutes. I would go to Ted Colbert, and then we move to Lorenzo Mariani. Ted.
Thanks. I'll be brief. I'll just weave together the second and first response to the question. You know, if we think about external dependencies and fragmented sovereignty, those words to me separate us all in a moment where it's important for our allies in NATO and Europe and the West to actually work together. And so we've got to think about how we think about the supply chain as a global team, as an allied team, and how do we break down the constraints for us to work together and leverage the key capabilities that we have in the time that we need to field what we need for the warfighter. And so I think these are all challenges that are interdependent, And I think that if we're really serious about the threat that is right in front of us, we will break down these barriers to thinking differently about externalities and fragmentation and work together to solve the problems and the constraints that we have to field the right capabilities to the warfighter.
Well, thank you. And so we finish with Lorenzo Mariani, and I don't know if you wanted to say a broader message in general about the Italian industry, but what was striking for me was that R&D got relatively low score, with actually R&D is exactly the future capacity to address challenges, and we know we're not only about to spend more, but also better, and set the infrastructure. In a way, your discussion was about, Domitilla Benigni, was about the universities, which are a key part. And so I leave it to you to finish this panel.
No, thank you, Andrea. I think if we move also a focus to the Italian industry, I personally have to reconsider also more in detail the lack of talented workforce, of course, as Domitilla said. I think those four elements are all issues in today's world. The real question is what do we have to do in order to make that there will not be challenges for. And while for the fragmentation, let's leave the European point that is a little bit more tough, to some extent, fragmentation is present also in our supply chain in Italy, absolutely. And I think this is a big, big issue that was brought to attention, unfortunately, by the COVID emergency, but was already known, I think. On the investment, I think the wake-up call I was mentioning before is now bringing, at least in our environment in Italy, the opposite effect, that money seems not to be a problem. And I think now it will be really to us, to the industries, to demonstrate that we have clear ideas on how to use this money on time, on cost, and on quality. And for the rest, I think this brings also the solution to the external dependency on the supply chain, where I fully share that we cannot think that we will do everything in Italy or in Europe. We have to understand that we have to collaborate, and saying collaboration can bring also the solution to what we call today dependency, that in reality maybe cannot be a dependency. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, thank you also, because in this way we have 2 minutes. I won't get fired by the Italian Air Force. It was very interesting. I also want to say, without naming, but many of you literally were flying from all around the world to make it here in time to participate, because that's a very important event for all of us from several perspectives, as the Italian, the transatlantic community, the industry. And I really appreciate your answers, your comments, which in a way highlight how complex is the defense industrial base, because exactly if we want an Air Force of towards 2030, we need the defense industry able to equip that Air Force towards the future. And with that, I would finish again with Michael Jordan was saying, because limits like fears are often just an illusion, and the idea is that we will look back in 10, 15, 20 years' time, and these won't look like fears, won't look like limits, but will look just as possibilities which open up for the future of the Italian Air Force, as well as for many other air forces. Thank you very much. I think I'm giving back the floor to the answerman, and I'm supposed that I think we are standing up. Correct me if I'm right, I think so. So thank you very much. Again, this is the last panel, but not the last day.
Thank you to our third panel for sharing their contribution. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the first day of the Aerospace Power Conference. We hope that you found the discussions to be informative and engaging. A moment of appreciation is due to all the distinguished panelists, keynote speaker, and moderator who have shared their priceless expertise with us. We'd also like to extend our gratitude to our audience, both here in person and online, for their attention and active participation through the surveys. We'll start again tomorrow promptly at 9:20, with in-processing starting at 8. But before we depart, we would like to invite you to join us downstairs for a drink and a cocktail. Thank you again for attending the first day of the Aerospace Power Conference, and see you tomorrow.